started practicing in 1971 after a near-death experience on my way home of a reunion of my band. And I didn't want to practice then. I wasn't the kind of person. And so I kind of backed into it, resisting all the way over a long period of time. And then I got ordained and, you know, had a lot of problems, and then it was now. So my main method of practice is to make every mistake once. And so then, having made the mistakes, I'm not so scared of making mistakes, for one. And let's see. Okay. And so I'm not so scared of making mistakes. And also then I realized that making mistakes is a function of being a limited human being, which is what we all are. And that it's the main way that we learn, that being perfect is a good way to have a good appearance, but it's not a very good way to learn. And so having you know, trying to work on the Noble Eightfold Path to relieve suffering is a kind of a drunkard's walk. You know, that mathematical formula of the drunkard's walk, where the person who's drunk walks in some direction, and then they hit a wall, and then they kind of bounce off the wall, and then they hit another wall, and eventually they get where they're going, but it's not like that. So, you know, we think that the Noble Eightfold Path is supposed to be like a path, like a freeway, but it really isn't. And the reason it isn't is because we're hardwired to be limited and not to understand it right away. So when we think about, well, what is mindfulness and what is concentration, we have to realize that although every single step on the Eightfold Path, every single one of those eights is like a thing in itself, that each one of them also holographically contains all the others. And so if I say mindfulness, it means that all other seven are there. And if I say concentration, it means that all other seven are there. This is really important because at any given time, you could notice, oh, my mindfulness has faded. I have no awareness of where I am. And I'm binge eating in a fog because I'm all by myself in my apartment, and someone left a bag of chips outside the door, and you know, there's something in me that thinks I should eat the whole bag. So, oh, what is missing here? Then you realize that, oh yeah, yeah, my view must have been wrong, or my intention must not have been complete, or you know, maybe the mental tapes of speech were faulty, like I have to clean my plate, I have to clean the bag, or whatever it was. And so you're constantly having to go back and start over. So this is really important because we think that mindfulness and concentration are kind of arcane things. But the point is that they're actually mental events that come up all the time and that we're constantly falling off of. So what exactly is mindfulness and what is concentration, and how do we work with them? So mindfulness is just what I described as the mother cat that appears to have a very restful body, but is in contact with bare attention moment after moment in such a way that if a kitten goes and starts doing something dangerous, that the mother cat is on it right away. So one of the main skills of mindfulness is bare attention. Bare attention isn't something we do. It's a feature of our mental and not just mental, but emotional, mental, intellectual, and spiritual life that's always functioning and that we can nurture or not, as the case may be. And it's a kind of an ability to register and remember a moral intention or a moral value, and let that be a baseline attentiveness that's going on moment after moment, or is newly created moment after moment. And so it means that, you know, in normal life, all sorts of thoughts and all sorts of events come up. But no matter what comes up, you stay with the ground awareness and ground attention. So that's mindfulness. So when the Buddha says about mindfulness of the body, he points out the body in the body. So basically, it's the bodiness of the body. It's not something that's set on top of the body. The same with the mind in the mind, and mind objects and mind objects. Of course, I left out feelings in the feelings. That feelings are part of the expression, but they're also part of the awareness. So feelings in the feelings is like awareness of feelings in the feelings, or of the body in the body, is like being aware of the cleanliness of a bathtub when we wash it by feeling around, not by like washing one part completely and then washing another part completely. We kind of let the bathtub be as it is while we're cleaning it. And so mindfulness is kind of like that, that we know we're cleaning, where we know we're sitting or working on a moral intention or whatever, but we're willing to let our life be as it comes up. And then, you know, we're feeling around under there to find out if there's any spots we haven't gotten to yet. And concentration is a specialized sort of mindfulness, a specialized sort of attentiveness to the present moment that directs the attention towards a specific subject of meditation and stays with it until that subject of meditation becomes part of us and part of our world, and we become it. So concentration, the process of concentration is helped by mindfulness. It's a form of mindfulness. So general mindfulness is when, you know, like first you have an intention to, let's say, eat healthy. This is a conventional form of mindfulness. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to eat from the 5 food groups, and I don't mean the 5 food groups of like butter, sugar, chocolate, etc. I mean the 5 food groups that include vegetables and protein and stuff like that. And then let's say you remember it, you make that intention on April 20th. Well, it might be like May 15th before you remember it again. And, you know, we usually think, oh, I'm not capable of mindfulness because I had this intention on April 20th and then I didn't think of it again till May 15th. And there were like 5 times I went shopping between April 20th and May 15th. And I got chips and, you know, soda and other stuff like that every single time, and forgot entirely my intention to buy like almond milk and, you know, spinach. But that's not the case. So mindfulness, the development of mindfulness, is a form of nourishment practice towards being able to stay present. And as we fulfill the conditions of remembrance and nourish our ability to remember, remembrance comes up more often. So I don't have arms that are big enough. You know, my reach isn't big enough to show how long a space can occur between the first moment of intending something and the moment that one actually does it. But let's say it's this big. And you can go along for quite a long time with this amount of space between moments of remembrance. But if you stay with it, after a while, it'll start doing this. You know, you might have some plateaus, but after a while, it'll start becoming more continuous. And then when you turn that sharpened skill towards a subject such as what is human suffering, then that becomes a concentration. But what is human suffering might be a kind of advanced subject for concentration. There are easier subjects. And there are also subjects that take you all the way from concentration newbie to extremely concentrated person. And of course, one of the best subjects is friendliness, which can take you from the beginning to the end of meditation practice. But in concentration, we take that sharpened faculty of being in the present moment and apply it to a specific question, whether it's a koan, whether it's a subject like form, like what is form? Today I'm just going to be with visual form or whatever it is. I'll be with colors and sounds and smells and tastes and touch. See if I can stay with form, and that way I'm concentrating on form. Or whether it's concentration on the body or concentration on the breath. You develop direct experience through harnessing the mind and bringing it back to that subject. And eventually it becomes continuous. And when that becomes continuous, we said the person's concentrating, that is concentration. Concentration has various steps and stages. Each step and stage is linked to the basic practice of being in the present, that is mindfulness. So that's the difference. But how do we practice concentration in Zen? So I would say, especially Soto Zen, well, I would say, how don't we practice it in Zen? So at a certain point, the Zen powers that be decided that they weren't going to emphasize the written teachings in the sutras or the words of the sutras, but we're going to emphasize much more basic experiences in that as the subject of meditation. So at some point, there was a kind of a lineage decision in Soto Zen that, for instance, we would turn to face the wall of our own delusion and just sit with perfect attention on posture and breathing. And, you know, we would sit with that subject that we had decided to sit with until we received direct experience. And that direct experience is called insight. And when insight is inclusive, when it includes the many beings, then it's what we call awareness or awakeness, direct seeing into reality, when it includes the many beings and also the infinite that the many beings express. So that's my basic idea. So that's in the big picture of Zen meditation. There's so many ways we do this. So for instance, Zazen. So Suzuki Roshi said, just to sit with perfect attention on posture and breathing and great pure effort is Zazen. But wait a second, Zazen, Dogen said, the Zazen I speak of is not learning meditation. So it's not concentration or meditation. It's not the steps and stages of concentration. It's direct experience that doesn't depend on steps and stages. So it's dropping off body and mind, and it is the dropped off body and mind, unmediated by some idea of sequential practice. And you do this moment after moment. So actually, you know, it takes time to understand what this means. So one time, Keiryū Rinpoche came to speak at Green Gulch, and he was asking us about what is Zen meditation, and someone described Zazen to him. And he just laughed and laughed and laughed. And I forget who it was who was the teacher, and said, "Why are you laughing? This is our practice. Why are you laughing?" And he said, "You guys are all mixed up. You do the end at the beginning." You know, we take a long time to get to that. So we study, you know, shamatha and vipassana, or stopping and singing. We study, you know, the Theravada practices, and then we study the Mahayana practices like the precepts. And then we study the Tibetan teachings, that, you know, the lineage teachings and the teachings about teachers, and, you know, all the yogic lore. And then we get to unconditioned meditation, to formless meditation. But you guys start with formless meditation, you know, basically, are you nuts? Yeah, I think, well, maybe we are. So, like for instance, let's say we have this practice called gathas, or verses that we do, which we think of as mindfulness verses, to collect ourselves when we do certain things. So, great robe of liberation, field far beyond form and emptiness, wearing the Tathagata's teaching, saving all beings. It's not a teeny little robe, it's a great robe of liberation. And it's beyond form, beyond having 5 panels, each panel made from one long and one short piece, made according to the Buddha's own wearing with the body and mind, etc. Okay, so it's far beyond that form, but it's also far beyond emptiness. So we can't just kind of rely on, oh, it's beyond emptiness, it's beyond form. You know, form is stupid and emptiness is great. We can't do that either. So the robe has within it a lineage of robe making, with a dedicatory verse that we say each time we wear it, that connects us to the entire universe of liberation. And we just wear it every day. And that's an example of the Zen practice that's mindful, because we put the robe on after Zazen. And it's also concentration, because in a minute, we're in the world of liberation. That doesn't leave anything out. Another example of a practice of mindfulness and concentration. Excuse me for using my sanitary wipes to do this, but let's say we have a practice of giving and receiving that's expressed in the meal service that we do. So every time you pick up a bowl and you can feel the warmth of the food and the spoon, and, dedicate what you're about to eat in a way that acknowledges all the many beings who were responsible for putting it together. That's mindfulness. And then when you eat that way, with complete nourishment of the body, of the senses, because you're tasting, you're smelling, you're appreciating, of the intention, because it goes with the union of giver, receiver, and gift, and with Buddha's way, and of consciousness, because the seeds of goodness are watered in us. So it's concentration, it's not just mindfulness. It's a direct experience of interconnection when we eat that we can remember through mindfulness, through doing those forms. So now I think I better stop, because I'm kind of at the outside limit of the amount of time I'm supposed to speak. And then let's just open it up to conversation. I think I kind of seeded the conversation with possible questions. And, or if you need to speak about something else, please do. Thanks.
Thank you, Vicki. So you can raise your hand or you can write in the chat.
Do you want to call on people? Because I'm kind of being vision impaired.
Yeah, I will. I have
Great.
gallery view now.
Okay. And are we calling on people, or are people just speaking, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, when people raise their hand, I'll call them out.
Okay.
I have a question. Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
So I understand mindfulness as both a quality and a practice. So can you say something about that?
Yeah, it's a quality of attention in that it moistens the ground of experience so that it's permeable to the nutrition of our intention. And it's also a practice of awareness that we cultivate that that can grow in us. Mindfulness has an interesting quality of being able to water the seeds, not just of good, but of ill. So it's a faculty of being connected with an intention, but that ability of mindfulness has been used for both good and ill. So it can be used to teach people how to be better killers or better lock pickers, as well as better meditators. So, but it is a quality of moistening the otherwise hard, dry ground of awareness so that a certain seed of intention can grow, because there's contact between person's intention and their action through the vehicle of that practice. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So then you're speaking about right or skillful mindfulness versus just the quality.
Yeah, and that word right or skillful is a really interesting, I mean, the word is sama. Okay, sama, but in Chinese or Japanese, the character sho, like shobo genzo sho, which I can't do it backwards, but you know, it looks like this. Sho is full of right angles. And so you can think of it as like a true, like we would true a wheel or true a, you know, like if we were building something, we wouldn't want it to be at any angle. We'd want the right angles to be right angles. You can also shorthand, think of it as shorthand for upright. So it's attentive. Okay. Whereas concentration isn't just attentive, it's attentive and aware. So it's attentive and open. Okay. So mindfulness is more open than normal states of mind, but consciousness is more open than that. And within that, you keep bringing yourself back to the same subject again and again. And because the subject isn't the same thing as an object, it's a process of not just watering the seed, but of giving it a chance to grow. Yeah.
Cameron?
Hello. Thank you so
Hi,
much.
Tara.
Hi. Thank you so much for. Oh. for the, I have to hold my phone. Thank you so much for the talk. I will definitely watch it again to absorb more. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. My question that I want to get feedback from you on is how to, the concept of each one of the the elements of the Eightfold Path being inside one of the elements of the Eightfold Path. So that sort of depth there, I keep running into that all over when I'm doing my studies. Like there's always another 4 things or another 3 things or you know, list within lists. And at the same time, I want to go back to the one focus and being singularly focused. So can you address how you kind of in your practice have all of that be true, like this very deep depth of everything and metaphysically, and then also just the coming back to the one?
Yeah, it's kind of like learning cooking, right? So let's say, you know, this was the season of asparagus just passed. Okay, so you might know that asparagus only comes once a year, unless you're really rich and just, but then it's out of season. It's not the same thing at all. So during asparagus season, you might make an asparagus soup, an asparagus salad, you know, roasted asparagus quiche, and so on. So you learn your asparagus skills. But the whole time that you're learning asparagus skills, you realize that asparagus comes just once a year, and that really what you're learning is cooking. And next year, you'll have ease with asparagus, and it'll just integrate with the rest of your cooking. And at some point, you won't even have to think about what to do with the asparagus. You'll be thinking, what can I make for my friend? Oh, there's asparagus, you know? But you'll be able to just kind of, okay, here, and they'll taste it and say, you know, I don't usually like asparagus, but this is incredible. You know, because it had the flavor of love. But if you start out by saying, oh, I'm gonna learn how to cook with the flavor of love, and I don't care because asparagus, you know, it's just an ingredient, and I'll just do, you know, do anything, then you'll never learn it. But if you know, in March, when the asparagus comes, you learn asparagus this year, then your asparagus knowledge will progress and grow, right? So it's just like learning anything else. You learn one of the things, but with humility, right? Knowing that you're limiting yourself for a learning process. That way you can learn lots of stuff, but you're never overwhelmed by what you learn. You never get stuck up about what you learn or overwhelmed by the fact that there's infinite amounts to learn. So that's my suggestion too, because we're just human. We're not going to be able to, like, you know, take in the whole ocean at one gulp, really. I mean, we can think we did, but we never did. Is that okay?
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Okay, I look forward to seeing you at the farmer's market.
I gotta learn how to cook now.
Okay. Yeah.
Chris?
Thank you so much for the talk. It was really wonderful to listen to it and learn the differences between mindfulness and concentration.
Yeah.
I find myself having a presence of mind or mindfulness around a lot of the things that I'm doing or that are happening. I feel like I have a space between myself and how I respond. I don't feel purely reactive, and yet I feel like there's a constant awareness of failing, like you talked about with the chips and
Yeah.
the soda, where I'm drinking the soda and I'm like, I am drinking this soda. Like I'm very aware of it. And there's, is there value in the mindfulness of failure, and how can you move beyond that to concentrate and hold yourself to the more skillful action or the more skillful thought or word?
Yeah, it's so interesting because how do you hold both your intention in the context of right view and also, that you're failing? How do you hold those both at the same time? So that's really important. I think it's really important because otherwise practice becomes a hopeless thing or a perfectionistic thing. So, there's different ways to cultivate concentration, and they depend on you. It depends on, kind of what appeals to you, not from here, but constitutionally appeals to you. So the Buddha taught various ways of concentrating. But one of the ways that I find really, really useful, especially in this world today, the Buddha taught it negatively, but I've started teaching it positively. And I'm following the example of Thich Nhat Hanh in doing this. And this is the teaching of the 4 nourishments. So the Buddha taught that you might fail at nourishing or not nourish yourself in particular ways, and that was not a thing that you wanted to do. It was something that he experimented with when he was trying to learn how to, meditate and do the jhanas, because he thought that would free him. But he found out eventually that it didn't free him. So he fasted a lot and went through extreme ascetic practices. And that was one way to concentrate, but it didn't work for him. So he said, no, you've got to nourish yourself. That's part of the middle way. But what I found is that shamatha, the art of concentration and progressing in the concentrations, is an act of nourishment. And if we think of it as an act of nourishment, that we can actually grow concentration in a very stable way. So in being moderate in food and exercise and sleep and cleaning ourselves appropriately is called nourishing the body. There's other things about nourishing the body, like air, water, basic things. And you'll notice that if you do those things, it's very easy to notice in this time of sheltering in place, because there aren't that many distractions unless we bring them in. That we can have a very stable environment, many of us in this time. So we can notice what changes in those practices do to us inside. It makes a kind of stability, a kind of conventional stabilization in us. But then if we begin to nourish the senses by giving ourselves experiences of beauty, visually and sound and smell, taste, touch, but not overdoing it or underdoing it, then we'll find that the senses begin to quiet and become satisfied, especially if we learn to appreciate the world around us. That's called nourishing the senses. And then if we understand what our intention is in life and for the present practice, every time we do it and don't not do it is called nourishing the intention. And so we grow in our ability. These are all muscles that develop with appropriate use. And then finally, if we nourish the body, nourish the senses, nourish the intention deeply in a focused way that goes with our inmost request, the consciousness will develop. The heart consciousness, the mind consciousness will develop. And we'll experience stability, a sense of oneness in friendliness, in compassion, in sympathetic joy, and in equanimity with everyone and everything. Because truly, the nourishments don't occur unless you have some insight into human life. And if you have that insight and that intention to nourish, then you can take cabbage and potatoes, which are the cheapest vegetables right now, and turn them into a nourishing meal. You can take, a thin futon and turn it into a place of royal ease. If you, so it's not that you're changing it from what it is. It's that with the marriage of your intention and acceptance transforms it morally and emotionally as part of your spiritual life. So that's how you build concentration that doesn't go away, that you don't have to worry about it all the time or, whip yourself into shape. You can nourish yourself and then you naturally become concentrated and resilient to do these practices. So that's a teaching for this time. That's a teaching for the time of COVID-19. And the Buddha taught that because before he was a Buddha, he was a yogi. And Zen practice is the yogic arm of Buddhist practice. It's, I offer that for your practice.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Is that clear as mud, everyone?
All right, here I have another one if someone doesn't. And it's forming, so I'm not sure how clear it is. As you all know, I like to see how these things work structurally. So what could you say about concentration and mindfulness in a structure?
Structurally? Yeah, well, as I said, mindfulness can be misused very easily. But concentration, if you dial it back from the most concentrated, so it's someplace between the most concentrated it can be and the least concentrated it can be, then suddenly you have the ability to see sameness and difference at the same time. Just saying. And okay, so I had a very embarrassing thing happen to me in an unpacking whiteness class. So you know that I've been taking these unpacking whiteness classes for eons now, and trying to work on the koan that I have about this, trying to make structural changes, kind of like cleaning a bathtub, because we depend on these structures, and also we hate them because they don't fit our feeling about inclusion or oneness. So we both depend on them and can't depend on them at the same time, which is nuts making. it just drives me crazy. So, so what do we do? Well, okay, so in an unpacking whiteness group, I was given an assignment. So I had to do a fishbowl exercise with a guy, and he was supposed to say the phrase, "I don't see color," and I was supposed to try to educate him about that. And so he said, "I don't see color." And instead of educating him about it, I just got totally outraged. And I made up a story, well, it was just a story. It was in the fishbowl. I was making up a story. So I was saying, okay, well, how about when Kathy was walking up the street and you were walking down the street and you moved to the side when you saw, before you knew it was Kathy, and she was really hurt that time. And this is because you're a white male, and blah, 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 blah. And he's like going like this, and everyone in the room is cringing, and I don't even notice it for a good 5 minutes. And then when I finish, there's an awful silence. And then the facilitator said something like, how much change do you think that accomplished in him? How much structural change in male dominance and in not seeing color did that intervention actually create? And I realized it was, what I had done was like negative change. What it would do is entrench the behavior that I was trying to intervene in. So at that moment, I realized, well, I've just got a long way to go. Because the moment I was faced with that situation, I completely lost it, instead of being able to hold my intention of working towards structural change in privilege. The structural change I was trying to work with was that he would be comfortable in walking down the street and moving to the side, and no one else would. And that he would be able to move safely down the street and no one else would. Whether it was the fear of a physical injury or the fear of an emotional one, no one else in the situation would. And without mindfulness of being able to be aware, have a basic level of awareness or concentration, and realize in being able to remember and apply my intention of continuously fostering structural change, I was lost, even at the interpersonal level. So I added a drop of suffering to the ocean of suffering, instead of a drop of goodness to the ocean of goodness. So mindfulness allows us to stay in the realm of our basic sanity, in that intention. And concentration allows us to stay with our intention and develop it so it becomes more upright, more open and deeper, moment after moment. And that instead of paying lip service to like iconic statements about unity and difference, that we would actually live in the emotional expression of that as human beings with developed hearts and minds, which I wasn't. So the difference was that I wasn't. There was no mindfulness and there was no concentration. There was only reactivity. Example.
Thank you.
It's an embarrassing example.
We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
So in the,
But you know, I just want to say one more thing is that I've been in charge of institutions, and the moment that we lose our sense of mindfulness and concentration of what we're doing it for, we get involved in doing, when really for structural change we have to be with being and not just doing. You know, so we have to be able to, like, let's say we're doing a you know, a counsel towards structural change, and we're trying to express our grief at something, and instead various members of the group start explaining some theory, right? We have to be with the situation in such a way that we can say, this is a grief group. We're actually trying to address the emotional pain of this traumatic situation that we're all in, because that will motivate us to create change. And when you explain, you sidetrack that. Please take a breath and just speak from personal experience. You know, so we, anyway, I might not be making much sense, but I feel like our ability to appropriately intervene towards the harmonious intentions that we have depends on mindfulness and concentration.
so we have just a few minutes. Unless somebody has a hand, I'm gonna posit something for you, because I've been thinking about the Eightfold Path, and that the samadhi grouping is more about how we can use our energy, for lack of a better way of putting it, towards, in service of enacting our wisdom, in service of the interaction, the sila and the wisdom we have. So, so it takes, in terms of skillful effort in the samadhi grouping, to me it's very much purposive towards wholesome and unwholesome, or skillful and unskillful.
Sure.
Or trued to your understanding of wisdom and interaction, to the Four Noble Truths, and our intention to a motivation with that. So it's the kind of purposive, the whole non-harming, the whole wholesomeness in mind, and of course in that also knowing when that's not, when we failed in that, or when it's leaning towards that. And then concentration is the energy to help us keep on track and keep on practicing, doing the practices to stay upright and help us focus when we need to. Like in your example would be, so mindfulness would be the energy to kind of remember the bigger intention, which is to make connection, because that's how big structural change happens. And then concentration is, mindfulness manages all the feelings that would come up, and concentration is that settleness to be able to, you know, feel yourself. Mindfulness is saying, oh, you got triggered, right? And concentration is the one go, okay, take a breath, get settled, so that the energy is towards this wholesome thing. There's an element.
Well, and this is where we begin to get into the differences between the yanas, right? So there are concentration practices which have to do with what you're doing on the cushion. Specifically, what's happening on the cushion, and those are the Theravada practices. But what you're describing is a Zen practice or Mahayana practice, because every time you have an experience of awakening, it's not an experience of awakening unless and until you make it an experience of awakening by integrating it into daily life. Otherwise, it's like, you know, like a half-baked piece of awakening that hasn't been realized, because our practice and realization go together. But if we forget that that concentration practice originally applied to what you do on the cushion, if we forget that, then we run the risk of saying, like, anything goes, that meditation in daily life is the same thing, which it isn't. And of course it is, but it isn't, you know? So they have different relationships. And then if we get into Vajrayana practice, of course, well, they don't realize that Zen practice does this too, but if we get into Vajrayana practice, where anything that comes up in the study of the way is the true human body. Now, wait a second, where have I heard that? Oh, that's Dogen's statement, you know? So anyway, all of these yanas interpenetrate, that none of them has like a deed to the real estate of the welfare of all beings, right? But we can't forget that that when we're saying concentration, we're saying meditative concentration. It's meditative concentration, which you're talking about the realization of meditative concentration in daily life. Otherwise, we begin to mix up right effort with right concentration, so we can't forget those distinctions that have been handed to us by the lineage. Does that make sense? Yeah.
All right, so we are at 8:30. Just happened right then. So, all right, would you mind dedicating the merit also, Vicki?
Okay. Well, is there anyone who needs our loving attention? If anyone wants to say the name of anyone, we probably can hear about 5 names first. So if anybody has a name of someone who needs to be thought of at this time, I'm going to say Misha.
Michelle, go ahead. You can just say it out.
Deborah Blanchard.
Martin
Wilcox.
Jill Helmberger.
Emma Shin.
Any name without which this will not be complete.
We'll say our way is usually we repeat after the leader. So everyone's on mute now. Unless you mute it yourself, then you have to unmute.
Okay, so how am I dedicating it?
Oh, you say your lines, but you pause, so we repeat after you. We echo you.
Am I doing beings are numberless, or
Any dedication?
anything I want? Okay. So as we leave this meeting,
As we leave this meeting,
with all beings we vow
with all beings we vow
to walk through the world guided by our inmost request.
walk through the world guided by our inmost
Requests.
And see Buddha in everyone and everything we meet.
And see Buddha
in
in
everyone and everything.
everything we meet.
May all beings be happy.
May all
beings be
happy.
happy.
May they be joyous and live in safety.
May they be
joyous and safety.
Free from suffering and the causes of suffering.
free from suffering and the causes of suffering.
Good night and sweet dreams.
good night.
Sweet dreams.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you. I feel honored. Take care of yourself, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. See you soon.
Thanks. Yeah, so nice to see you. Thanks. Thanks. Good night. Take care of yourself. Yeah, sending love.
Let's see.
Lien,
Yeah, I'm right here. Still,
this is a hug, okay?
Thank you. I'm sorry if my intro was kind of.
You were fine. You were great.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Had a good time.
I really look forward to the day that I can see
I know.
you and everyone live. So
I know.
take care, okay?
All right, you too. If you need anything,
Okay.
no.
Same here.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. See ya. Ta.
Ta.